After 7 years, Sony has finally launched the PSVR2. And I've used a couple of VR headsets in the past. I've used the PSVR1 since its launch, the Quest 1, the Quest 2, the Quest Pro, so I'm actually curious to see how the PSVR2 compares to all of those options. And we'll cover everything from comfort all the way down to games. So starting off with the comfort, this is one of the most important things in a VR headset. It doesn't really matter if the screen looks great, the graphics are good, if the headset is not comfortable enough. And I gotta say, the PSVR1 was actually the most comfortable VR headset that I had ever worn. Now, in terms of putting it on your head, the process is very similar to the PSVR1. So you have this wheel on the back, which you can turn to adjust the tension, and then you have this button on the front, which you use to move the headset back and forwards. And I gotta say, it is slightly more comfortable than the PSVR1 is on my head. My favorite part is that the seal around my eyes is so much better than the PSVR1. Like, I can barely see any light leakage compared to the first gen. And it's actually significantly more comfortable than the Quest 2, even with its Elite strap. And that's because I always found the strap to be a bit too tight around the back. Now, when it comes to the ease of use, there is a massive difference between the two. You had to connect all of these cables just to get a PSVR1 to work, and I actually stopped using it because of this. Whereas with a PSVR2, you simply have a single USB Type-C cable, and that's it. So let me just plug it in and see how quick this is to set up. And I gotta say, this cable is definitely longer than I expected. Okay, so we've just finished the setup process, and I gotta say, it took about 35 minutes, way longer than what I was expecting, especially compared to something like the Quest 2, which is pretty much instant. I gotta say, the eye tracking setup was quite intuitive, and I was surprised to see the Guardian mode being present on the PSVR2, which is something that we also find on the Quest 2. Now, one thing that I found quite difficult to adjust was just the sharpness of the image. I found it to be quite blurry, even in the center, no matter how much I adjusted the slider. So now let's talk about the visuals. And I gotta say, resolution-wise, it is a significant improvement over the PSVR1. It's got a 4K display compared to, well, 1080p per eye, so it is significantly sharper. But I have noticed this sort of overlay on top of the screen, which kind of looks like a matte coating, so you don't really get retina quality, even though the screen is way better than everything that I've used before. Right, so in terms of the field of view, we have a 110-degree field of view compared to the 100 on the PSVR1, which wasn't actually bad for the first gen. In terms of how much I can see, I can basically see up until here, so it's nowhere near, real life, but it's still pretty good. Now, one of the key selling features of the PSVR2 is something called foveated rendering, which means that whatever you're looking at is going to be rendered at the highest possible resolution, whereas something that you're not looking at will be rendered at a lower quality to save on processing power. But I gotta admit, when using the headset, this is actually very difficult to see. So if I'm looking at the main menu here, it's pretty sharp. If I look at paused, it's blurry. Like, even though I'm looking straight at it, it's still blurry. So let's try this in a game. When it comes to foveated rendering inside a game, I'm looking at this guy's head, and it just doesn't look sharp. Like, it looks out of focus. And if I'm looking at this tree, that tree is actually more in focus than this guy's head. So I'm not sure if it's just the lenses being blurry for some reason, or if foveated rendering is not working properly. Now, in terms of the controller, this is a huge upgrade over the PSVR1s. You see, the PSVR1 controllers were actually not designed with the PSVR1 in mind. In fact, they were designed with the PlayStation Move, which came with the PS3. Whereas the PSVR2's controllers were specifically designed for VR, and that definitely shows. I mean, the PSVR2's feels so much more comfortable, so much more compact, and it's also lighter than the first gen. Of course, we no longer have this light bulb for tracking. Instead, we have way more accurate infrared sensors inside this entire controller. They also now charge by USB Type-C instead of micro USB. And I've noticed that the buttons actually feel clickier than on a DualSense controller, which I actually much prefer. And even when compared to the Quest 2's controllers, the PSVR2s are significantly better. They feel much more comfortable in the hand, they're thinner, easier to grip, and they also charge by USB Type-C compared to requiring separate batteries like with a Quest 2. Now, one of the other unique features about these controllers is that they also offer you adaptive triggers, which means that when I'm pulling on this bow here, I can actually feel the tension in the bowstring, which is really, really cool and really immersive compared to something like the Quest 2, which doesn't have this feature. Now, another one of the key selling features of the PSVR2 is that it has haptics in both the controllers, the triggers, as well as the headset itself. And I gotta say, I can already feel, yeah, like literally I'm touching this guy, his arm, and I can already feel some haptics, which is really, really cool. So it does actually seem to work very well, like even when I'm touching this, this wood from the boat. So yeah, that's great. Oh, that's really cool. So I can actually feel the haptics on the headset on my head when the Stormbird passed over my head. That's really, really cool. So I gotta say, in terms of haptics, that is something that the Quest 2 also has, but the ones on the PS5s are significantly more powerful. So they definitely do match the DualSense quite well, I gotta say. So what sort of games can you play on the PSVR 2? Well, the flagship game is Horizon Call of the Mountain, and holy smokes, this looks so good. This is incredible. Like, I'm not even kidding. This is the best looking VR game that I've ever played. Not just the resolution, but also just the fidelity of it. And that combined with the haptics, the water physics, everything looks incredible. This is amazing. Now, I gotta say something really cool. Oh, look at that. So you can actually interact with a lot of the things in the environment, like the water, for example. Look at that. All right, so now I'm in No Man's Sky, and a really cool thing is that a lot of these games that were not made for the PSVR got updates to support the PSVR, like No Man's Sky and a bunch of other games. And these updates are free, so you don't actually have to pay for them, which is really, really cool. And I gotta say, No Man's Sky especially looks very, very good. Not quite as good as Horizon Call of the Mountain, but still very, very impressive. Now, something that I've noticed is that the resolution of this game is noticeably lower than compared to Horizon Call of the Mountain. So just looking at these instruments, they're quite fuzzy and hard to see, so I'm not sure if this is just the foveated rendering not working or something else. Okay, and now we're playing Resident Evil Village, which also got an update to support VR. And this is a separate VR mode, so it's not a full game as far as I'm aware. It seems to be like a completely different thing. Looks really good. Better than No Man's Sky, actually. Like, I'm surprised by how good the textures look in this game. The bed textures, the steel, the wooden table, although it is very dizzying because you don't teleport in this game, you simply move like this and it's just extremely dizzying. Like, it's a great looking game and the mechanics are really good, but I don't know, man, it's just way too dizzying and it's very, very tough to play in VR. Now, you can also play regular games in non-VR mode, and in this case, you will kind of have this floating TV in front of you, which looks pretty high res, not quite as high res as a regular TV, of course, but still pretty good quality. Now, in terms of sound, the PSVR 2 doesn't have any speakers, but it does come with these earbuds included in the box, just like the PSVR 1 did. And they do sound pretty good. You also get 3D audio from these, which seems to work quite well. Now, if you wish, you can also use the Pulse 3D headphones if you have them, and I gotta say the sound quality is like 10 times better with these, so I would definitely recommend using these instead of the ones that come in the box. So I've been using it for about an hour and a bit, and I gotta say, in terms of comfort, it's still very comfortable, so that's great. But it does press on my nose a tiny bit more than I was expecting, and yeah, the image still isn't perfectly sharp, so I do always feel like I need to just use a cleaning cloth and clear my lenses. And I quickly want to talk about this cable. So we still get that anchoring effect, unfortunately, that we had with the PSVR 1. So it's not great. Of course, the graphics are amazing, so that kind of justifies having a cable, but at the same time, I did actually trip on it a few times, so it's not great, it's still there. Maybe with the next version, we'll finally have a wireless PSVR. And when it comes to tracking, this is so much better than on the PSVR 1. Like, I can literally have my hands behind me, and it would still keep track of my hands perfectly. So that's incredible. Like, I don't even know how it's doing that. So much better than on the PSVR 1. So in conclusion, is the PSVR 2 worth it? Well, based on my quick usage, I would say kind of. It is a bit tricky because when you consider that you need to buy a PS5 as well, you'll exceed $1,000. Now, at the same time, you do get a much more immersive experience than with the Quest 2, which mostly has, mobile games. But the thing is, when you compare this to buying a dedicated gaming PC and then a high-end VR headset, this is so much better in terms of the value that you're getting from it. The haptics were impressive, the graphics were really impressive, but I do think that it still needs some work in terms of just the clarity of the image, and I don't know, the lenses, like I said, did feel a bit blurry occasionally. But what do you guys think? Are you getting one, or are you simply waiting for the next version? If you do want to get one, you can find some great deals by clicking on the YouTube shoppable cards down below. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm Daniel, to ZONEofTECH, and I'll see you guys in the next one. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers.